It's a bit older now, but there was a very interesting study, and it was replicated later than this, but the initial study took resumes, and it sent out resumes that were twins. They'd have two very similar resumes in terms of education and in terms of experience, and they'd send them out with two different names. They would have pairs, and they would pair names that sounded like different races in the United States. The name of the study was Who is More Employable, Emily and Greg or Lakeisha and Jamal? What the study was looking at is whether traditionally African American sounding names got called back as much as traditionally white sounding names, and the answer was no. The black sounding names did not get as many calls on the resume. This is back in the days where you still mailed resumes and you still got calls in them. I think it was year 2000 was the initial study. And so they were able to measure that, and it clearly showed a big gap. And so is there discrimination against black workers? Absolutely. Even though what I'm about to tell you may change your perspective on it a little bit. You can't account for everything with what I'm about to tell you. Interesting thing though, if you look at blacks in the United States and we categorize them by groups of immigration patterns. So native blacks are going to be those who have been in the United States 3 or more generations. And then there's the immigrant blacks who are just arriving. And then there's children of immigrants who have who their parents are immigrants. Okay, if you look at an immigrant group that's overwhelmingly black, say Nigerian immigrants to the United States and their children outperform general Americans, not black Americans, but Americans in general, outperform them in both income attainment and educational attainment. And so the question becomes, what is the difference between those two groups, and does that say it's all discrimination against black people? It could be a factor, but when you have a group of blacks outperforming the general population and another group underperforming, it is worth another look. I am from Ohio. I grew up there from age 4, and our schools there, I think they are in Texas to some degree, but our schools in Ohio are extremely segregated by race. You can draw lines around where kind of the black neighborhoods are. You can point to which high schools are going to be majority black, which ones have very few blacks. And there are some in between, but it's more rare in Ohio. It's extremely segregated by race in terms of education. And the schools that most of the black students go to are not funded as well. They're not in good of neighborhoods, has a lower tax base. Like many states, Ohio funds its schools through local property taxes. And if the home values are lower in the neighborhood, the school gets less money. And so it could be that having in that study, having a black sounding name or even having black skin in some parts of the country, maybe even Texas, is not necessarily a marker for discrimination against a race, although it is and it could be. It might also be a marker for being from a high school that is underperforming. So if you have a white sounding name, perhaps that person is more likely to have gone to a high performing high school, and somebody with a black sounding name might have been more likely to go to a low performing high school. And that goes into that theory of why do blacks live in certain neighborhoods? Well, there was the redlining. People could only buy in certain neighborhoods, which ended up being lower income neighborhoods. And so if that theory holds true, what we will see as black homeowners start to buy in other places and other races other than black start buying in black neighborhoods, we should see a leveling of that kind of thing out. Another issue to explore is social problems in the black community as compared to the general American community. There is an economist named Melissa Carney who wrote a book, and it was released just a little bit ago, a couple months ago, and this video is being filmed in November 2023. And she is not, I don't know her personal political view, but she seems to be a bit on the political left. So I'm not just picking out a social conservative to flaunt this idea, which I'm about to present. This is legitimate stuff, and she's a likely leftist, which has leftist ideas, which is, and this book comes across as like, to some of us, it's obvious, to others of us, is like, oh, wow, that is a good point. Well, her study talks about the two-parent privilege, okay? She has a lot of data on having two parents at home, regardless of whether or not they're both working. It's not just an income effect, it's a time and attention to the child effect. Kids in that environment tend to do better. If you look at all Americans, the illegitimacy rate, which I hate that term because I don't believe personally that children are ever illegitimate, but the rate of, what could we call it? The rate of children born without their mother being married is about 40% for all American groups. It's relatively low, maybe around 12%, depending on which kind of Asian group, because some Asian groups are very high with that. But like Filipino, for example, is like 7%. 7% of the children are born without the parents married. For whites in general, it's non-Hispanic whites, it's about 28%. For Hispanics in general, it's around 50%. For all blacks in the United States, it's roughly 70%. So perhaps another issue, in addition to likely discrimination in general, is that many black workers came from homes that only had one parent. And that can be, according to Melissa Carney, a huge disadvantage which kind of stays with the child throughout his or her career cycle. And to compare, we already compared native blacks to black immigrants, specifically from Nigeria. Not specifically from Nigeria, but we have all blacks together. The rate of children being born in only a one-parent household is 70%, but specifically the group of black immigrants, that rate is 39%. So you do have evidence of, in black immigrant groups, of more likelihood of being born with two parents married at home than you do if you're in the general black population. So those theories may modify how we kind of approach labor market discrimination. But again, I'm not saying it does not exist or cause problems, but I will close on this thought. Any minority group that we have evidence of their pay is lower or they're discriminated against in the workplace, not how they're treated, not how hard it is to get a job, but almost all of the differences in actual pay can be accounted for credentialing differences. What that means is if you are a minority candidate of any kind that is discriminated against, by having the skills necessary to do the job, by having the proper schooling for the particular job, those things seem to be the most important. And regarding treatment, no, but just regarding pay, that seems to be the difference. So if you are in such a situation, do not give up. Get the credentials you need, including experience and education, to do the job you want, but your income should not suffer for the fact that you are a minority.